This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Liverpool by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wayne Hennessy and Alexander Soroff after the game. So let's begin. Ten-man Palace tasted defeat in their first home Premier League game of the campaign as Liverpool netted late in both halves to leave South London with all 3 points. Roy Hodgson's team held firm in the face of the rampant Reds' strike force for almost the whole of the first half, but a controversial penalty allowed James Milner to tuck home from 12 yards to completely change the complexion of the game. The Eagles then had Aaron Wan-Bissaka sent off for bringing down Mohamed Salah en route to goal, but as they pressed to gain a last gasp point against the odds, Sadio Mane finished off what was a swift counter-attack to net his customary goal against the side from S3E4. The opening 20 minutes saw Palace hold their own against the Reds, who enjoyed the majority of the play but couldn't find a way to trouble Wayne Hennessy until Mane shoulder barged him in the air to illegally bundle the ball into their net. However, Jurgen Klopp's team quickly showed their cutting edge when a wonderful racking pass by Naby Keita sent Mohamed Salah racing towards the post, aided by a majestic touch to bring the ball into his stride, but the Premier League's top goalscorer of last season lobbed it into the Homesdale. Then moments later, the Eagles nearly netted an early goal of the season contender from out of nowhere. Christian Benteke picked up a loose pass and found Andros Townsend towards the right, who drifted inside, and the winger rifled a bullet of a shot goalward which left Alisson grasping thin air, but the ball cracked off the crossbar with Wilfried Zaha's follow-up being blocked by the oblivious Trent Alexander-Arnold. That will be Hodgson's team's only real threatening moment of the half, but they seemed destined to go into the break deservedly level after Hennessy was equal to a Naby Keita effort as the summer signing tried to beat the Welshman at his near post, but that was just before controversy struck. A minute before half-time, the ball found its way to Salah inside the area, with Mamadou Sakho keeping tabs on him in close proximity. The Frenchman had a couple of clean stabs at the ball before the Egyptian went down inside the box and Michael Oliver pointed to the spot. It was a soft award, but Milner made no mistake from 12 yards to send the visitors ahead at the break. They nearly doubled it 3 minutes into the second half when Andrew Robertson snuck down the left and fed a perfect pass across the box for Salah, who managed to get around Hennessy but couldn't tuck away the chance, instead teeing up Mane, who spurned a good chance. Despite that brief flurry, Palace were more creative in the second half and Milivojevic bent a free kick goalwards that Alisson managed to parry away at the last moment. Patrick Van Aanholt blasted over from the corner of the box and Zaha fired straight at Alisson as the host built up a head of steam. However, with 15 minutes to go, an uphill task became a mountain to climb. A deft pass by Roberto Firmino and another great touch by Salah allowed him to race clear of the Eagles' defence, but Wan-Bissaka did his best to try and catch him and prevent him from making it 2-0. Bahir's challenge clipped the attacker's heels and he received Palace's first red card since February 2016. The resulting free kick came to nothing, which allowed Palace to remain in the game, but with the numerical advantage, the Reds sensed blood in the water and Hennessy was forced into a save from Mane and Salah as Klopp's team piled on the pressure. But there was a glimmer of a chance for the men in red and blue when debutant Max Meyer nearly managed to steer home a cross from the right, but the ball evaded him by fractions as it whizzed across the area. But in stoppage time, one final push saw Palace win a corner which wasn't capitalised on, and when faced with a 2-2 chance, Salah slipped in Mane, who rounded Hennessy to net his 6th goal in 8 appearances against his favourite opponents, and sealed the win for the Merseysiders. Crystal Palace suffered a first defeat of the season on Monday night as they lost out 2-0 at home to Liverpool. Goals from James Milner and Sadio Mane settled the contest in the Reds' favour, although Palace boss Roy Hodgson was left feeling aggrieved after a controversial penalty award in the first half, which led to the opening goal of the game. The match was not short of drama as Aaron Wan-Bissaka was sent off in the second half after making a challenge on Mo Salah as the last man, before Mane sealed the win in injury time. But there were plenty of talking points arising from the game. Here are 5. Number 1. The atmosphere. There were question marks over how the famous Selhurst Park atmosphere would be affected by the Holmesdale fanatics not being active as a group in their usual corner of the lower Holmesdale stand. This was following a standoff between the club and the group about a possible relocation to elsewhere in the stand. But the Selhurst Park faithful were in fine voice again from the off, singing loudly and proudly. There were times during the game where the noise levels dropped from the home fans, and Liverpool's travelling support did well to drown them out on occasions, and some people felt that the atmosphere suffered without the Holmesdale fanatics. Number 2. Player watch. England boss Gareth Southgate was in the stands to watch the game at Selhurst Park, with plenty of English players in action. But while he may have been there to keep a watchful eye over Liverpool trio Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joe Gomez and Jordan Henderson, there were also plenty of Palace players to attract his attention. And Aaron Wan-Bissaka once again performed at right back, doing superbly against a tricky Sadio Mane at times, whilst James Tompkins alongside him in defence and Andros Townsend in front of him also had good games. Number 3. Penalty or no penalty. Crystal Palace did well to restrict their opponents in the first half, but fell behind to a contentious penalty. Mohamed Salah went down under a challenge from Mamadou Sakho and it looked soft, but referee Michael Oliver awarded the spot kick, much to the frustration of the hosts. And the Palace fans made their feelings clear towards Oliver and Salah as they made their way off the pitch at half-time, roundly booing both individuals. There looked to be minimal contact, but was there enough to warrant a penalty? No. Not according to Roy Hodgson, who was adamant that it was not a penalty in his post-match press conference. Number 4. Mo problems. Last season Mohamed Salah scored the winner as Liverpool beat Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, and he was in the thick of the action again on Monday night as he won a contentious penalty for the first goal before being involved as Aaron Wan-Bissaka got sent off in the second half. The Egyptian also laid on the assist for Sadio Mane in injury time as he made decisive contributions despite being far from his best on the night. He is certainly a popular figure for Liverpool fans, but he was cast as a villain for Palace supporters, who made their feelings known as he was roundly booed at the end of both halves. And number 5. Sad times for Palace. Just what is it about Sadio Mane in scoring goals against Crystal Palace? The Senegalese star scored in injury time to seal the points for the visitors as he netted his 6th goal in 8 games against the Eagles. 3 of those came during his time with Southampton, whilst he has now scored in his last 3 league games for Liverpool against Palace, becoming the first player to do so. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. And if, like myself, you are someone who likes to go on forums and likes to read what others are saying, as well as obviously posting your own opinions, then of course, I would highly recommend you do join the Facebook group because it is a great place to do so. Now, of course, you can join the Facebook group, but also the Facebook page and the Twitter pages are great things to follow as well. We do regularly update you with all of the latest news as well as a few opinions and a few polls. So if you do want to get involved in that and, get all the latest news to you straight away, especially during the transfer windows. Obviously, the transfer window has just passed, but during the transfer window, we were very active on there, posting all of the latest rumours. So if you are someone who likes to keep up to date, then of course you can follow us on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Now, of course, if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then I want you to get involved as you would do in our Facebook group, and obviously you can do that by dropping a comment below, and that's with your player ratings. So you rate the players from 1 to 10 as you do, and even if you don't want to do that, just drop your sort of general views of the game. And whether you're a Liverpool or a Palace fan, then of course, if you're on the podcast, do feel free to share your opinions of the game, because I personally like to go into the comments and read what other fans thought about the game and their opinions of players' performances and things that happened during the game. But also I do sort of like it when other fans come to the page, not only listening to the podcast but also read other people's opinion so that we can have a bit of discussion. So if you are someone who has a different opinion to mine or just want to share your opinion, then of course you can drop it below in the YouTube comments if you are listening to the podcast there. And like I've said already, it's basically so that I can read it and so that other people can also read it as well. And like I've said, it's not just about the player ratings and whether you agree or disagree with me, but it could be your views about the game. Whether you thought it was a red card, which I'll go on to say, but I'll say just simply yes, I think it was a red card. Was it a penalty? No. And they're my general views, and I'll go on to talk about it later. But do comment below with your views about them 2 sort of key points in this game in particular. Now, of course, if you do want to follow any of these social media pages or join the Facebook group, which certainly I will accept you into it, then obviously you can check all links that will be in the description below. But just before I go on to talk about the player ratings, I'm just going to talk about the restructuring I've sort of done of it, because if you've been listening for last few seasons or so, you know that what I do is I go through each player individually, give them a rating out of 10, give you a little bit of a summary of the game, then I go into a sort of discussion about their overall performance, discussing, for example, Wayne Hennessy, the first player I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about some of the key moments, so saves he's made, a few kicks, things like this. I'll talk about his game. Then obviously I'll just go on and just try and summarise the performance, then move on to the next player. But what I'm going to do now, I think this layout I've thought about, and I think quite a lot of people have done, if you listen to other podcasts, is basically just, rather than sort of having that so that you start with the rating, then you have a summary, then you discuss it, I'm just going to go straight in, give you the rating, then just go in and just fully just sort of discuss the player. So rather than just giving you a summary then going forth to explain it, I'm just going to basically go on a really big discussion about each player, rather than giving you that small summary, just giving you sort of a bit of information about their performances, going over a few of the key moments. And I personally think that would be a better way sort of to discuss players. So rather than just reading it from my script, just having a more sort of open discussion about player performances would be better, and probably it will give me time, and it will probably allow me to give a little bit more detail in the player or about the player's performance, basically because I'm not sort of giving you that sort of short summary beforehand. But obviously the ratings will be the same. I'll just say the player's name, the rating after that. So really all that's really changing is just I'm getting rid of that small summary at the beginning and just sort of having a more discussion based part of the podcast. But of course, if you do want to also get involved with your player ratings, and if you do like this new system, then comment below, or even you can contact us on Twitter. So if you do want to get involved, then of course drop a comment below or contact us on our Twitter page, which of course you can find in the description below, or you can just search for it at eCrystalPalace. So now I'm going to start off with the player ratings, obviously starting to go with Wayne Hennessy. Now I'm going to give him an 8 for this game because I think his performance was very good, and much like his performance was last weekend where he was in the Premier League Team of the Week, and because of how good he was against Fulham, once again Hennessy in this game here showed how solid he was. He was putting in some fantastic stops. There was one in particular, or there was two in particular towards the end of the second half, where obviously Liverpool putting on that pressure to get that second goal just to sort of kill the game dead. And obviously both Mane and Salah both had shots on goal, and Hennessy made fantastic saves. So once again, I've talked about that one with Salah, it was 1-on-1. So you're talking about Hennessy sort of beginning of last season, wasn't very confident, was playing quite bad, but as soon as the new goalkeeping coach has come in, he started to get better and better, and certainly through pre-season and the start of this season he's been playing really, really well, and I do think he's fully deserving of that 8. But beginning of last season, stuff like one-on-ones was stuff where we're like, well, the player's got past the defence, is going to go in, it was quite inevitable. But what Hennessy has started to show, especially in this game, is actually now, because he's got more confidence, he's got a little bit more awareness of the game because of that, and whether that's because of his own confidence or new goalkeeping coach, whatever it is, it seems to have improved his performances. And as we saw here, he's not scared on a one-on-one situation now, and of course he can make himself really, really big. Now of course Salah, I'll go on to talk about him later, but we know what he was from last season. He's a fantastic talent, got lots of speed, and certainly he's sort of the least player, or the last player you want coming at you one-on-one. But the fact that Hennessy made himself big, made that save in particular, was of course great to see as well. Now of course he made quite a few solid saves and made a few fantastic saves throughout the game, but also he done sort of the fairly routine saves really well as well. And that's once again going back to last season, the first half, that was something he didn't do. He wasn't making these routine saves, and he was just making simple errors. But fast forward, second half of last season, pre-season, and of course the beginning of this season, he's now not only making these fantastic saves from headers, from shots on one-on-one, but now he's starting to finally make these routine saves. And basically that's what you want from a goalkeeper. Even though they may not be the best in the world, you want them to do the routine stuff, and of course pick out a few fantastic saves here and there, and that's certainly what Hennessy's starting to do. Now of course I don't think he really looked nervous in the game, and that's another thing. I think the confidence he's got from last season bringing into pre-season, and once again I keep repeating it, but the beginning of this season he doesn't look nervous as he did at the beginning of last season. And even though there was a couple of times where rather than sort of catching the ball or putting it out for a corner or just getting it to a defender so they could clear it, yes, he spilled it a few times, but I don't think where he spilled it no one really could get anywhere near it, so that didn't really harm us, let's say. But once again, like I've said already, a couple of times his kicks were a bit out of touch, and they were going out for touch rather than, like we saw against Fulham last weekend, going to Benteke, winning a knockdown and Wolf shooting a goal. So although his distribution was fantastic against Fulham, if I had to be critical of his performance, I would say that actually a few of his free kicks and goal kicks were ballooned out of touch. So maybe that's something he can improve on his game. But quite clearly for me, and I mentioned this last weekend, that competition for places that Gaeta's bringing in, and obviously more time with Dean Kiley, who's obviously, as the time they're spending together gets longer in training, they seem to be developing a good partnership, and he seems to really doing really well in terms of developing Wayne Hennessy as a player. That seems to have helped him come on, leaps and bounds. And once again, people may think, sometimes it doesn't mean anything. You bring in another player and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to improve the player. But in the case of Wayne Hennessy, it certainly has done that. Vicente Gaeta came in. We all fully expected him to be the first choice goalkeeper. But because of how well Hennessy played last season, during pre-season and obviously the start of the season here, I think Roy Hodgson's made his pick. But the fact that he's got very good competition seems to obviously A, make him better, but B, gives us that good backup option if Hennessy makes an error or obviously he gets injured. But at the moment, I think Hennessy's performance is absolutely fantastic. You look back to last season, he was fairly inconsistent the first half. Well, he was fairly inconsistent the whole season as a whole. But if you look at it in two halves, first half of the season, absolutely dreadful. Second half of the season, he was good in spells and still had a few mistakes here and there. But certainly the start of this season, he seemed to have improved drastically, and long may it continue, because having form like this is going to be quite crucial, because as important as your attack is to your team scoring goals, as important as your defence is to keeping goals out, you've got to think the goalkeeper is one of the most important positions on the pitch, because if Hennessy makes saves at certain moments of the game, like he did against Fulham, like he did against Liverpool, if you make saves at crucial points in the game, obviously that can keep you in the game and help you push on maybe for an equaliser, for a goal, or even just to come back into the game. So once again, Wayne Hennessy here, another fantastic performance from him, and long may it continue. But do comment below with your thoughts about his performance, but I do think an 8 is a fair result. So we're going to move on now to our first player in defence, and that is the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Now, much like Wayne Hennessy, I think he had a really good performance, and I do think he is fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. But in terms of his overall performance, before I go on to talk about that, I just want to put it out there. It was a red card. I know there's a lot of debate as to whether it was a bit theatrical, let's say, from Mohamed Salah. Yes, it was only a little touch, and obviously it clipped him slightly, and obviously Salah's thrown his head back, made it really dramatic. Yes, it probably would have looked like a dive if he wasn't the last man, but purely based on the fact that he was the last man, he took him down. That's a fully, deserved red card. Yes, it was a bit harsh, but I think that's fully deserving. And if it had been the other way around, I certainly think, yep, that's fair enough. You're taking down the last man. But to be honest, if you take away that red card, you probably would have got a 9, because his performance against the best front three, in my opinion, probably in the league, next sort of level with Man City. The fact that he was able to perform as well as he did against the likes of Sadio Mane, Mohamed Salah and Roberto Firmino as well, who was fairly quiet, I would say, by his standards. The fact that he was able to deal with them so well, really just epitomises how good his performance was. And like I said already, I really want to emphasise that his performance was so good that if he hadn't have got the red card, he probably would have got a 9. And another thing about the red card is, it's taking one for the team. We didn't know at that point that we were going to have a corner and they were going to break on us and round Hennessy and score on a counter-attack. But what we did know at that point is you don't make that tackle and Salah goes through on goal and scores, or you take him down. Yes, you've got a red card, but you take one for the team and stop it from conceding another goal. Yes, ultimately we went on to concede another goal, but the fact that Wan-Bissaka, even though he's young, you might say a bit naive, the fact that he took one for the team, you've got to congratulate him on that. Although, because we were down to 10 men, it ultimately meant in the end we still went on to concede that other goal. But to be honest, it is quite odd to say that actually a player who got sent off could arguably be the man of the match, not just Palace's man of the match or Palace's best player, but also the man of the match of the whole pitch. Because if you watch the game back, you hear all of the pundits, Jamie Carragher, Gary Neville as well, they were literally putting loads of praise on Aaron Wan-Bissaka, even though he got sent off, which really just shows how good his performance was considering he still got sent off. Now, personally for me, I think a word I would use is fine. I think everything other than the red card about his performance was very, very good. Very, to a very, very high standard. And although we've seen that from him, especially against Fulham, but obviously last season as well, it was obviously quite impressive once again to see him playing so well. And it just goes to say, show that even though he's only played 8 games, or I think it's 9 games now, the fact that he's such a talent. And yeah, it basically shows that the fact that he's been so well in these 9 games shows how much of a talent he is then. Obviously, I apologise for confusing my words there. But to be honest, like I've already mentioned, he was mainly marking Sadio Mane for the majority of the game. Yes, he went on to concede that goal, but when Mane scored, obviously, Wan-Bissaka wasn't on the pitch. But the fact that he was able to keep him quiet and still get forward and sort of proved to be the extra man linking up with Andros Townsend obviously showed once again that not only has he got that defensive ability to keep players like Sadio Mane quiet, but also he's got a little bit more confidence. Obviously, having got that assist against Fulham, he's now got a bit more confidence to go further forward, and rather than sort of letting the occasion get to him and just whipping in a cross which goes out for a goal kick, he actually looked quite composed against Liverpool going forward, and certainly was proving to be a very, very good option on a number of occasions, being the extra man. And I certainly do think going forward, obviously we're going to miss him because it's a 1-match ban, but going forward I do think that if he can develop, obviously his defensive game is fine at the minute, but if he can develop even more that attacking threat, it would have been fantastic. And if some of his crosses and some of the balls into the box had resulted in goals, I probably would be standing here or sitting here giving him a 10 out of 10 performance, because not only was he solid defensively, ignoring the red card once again, but he would have obviously had that attacking influence as well. But I do think obviously an 8 is fully deserved for him. Now, talking about his offensive contribution, there was one in particular, just talk about this separately, a fantastic couple of crosses into the box, but there was one in particular that fell really, really nicely to Zaha. Great ball into the box from the right hand side, and obviously Zaha playing as our striker alongside Benteke, obviously he's the target man, that's who you're going to aim the ball at, and obviously Zaha did get on the end of it, which shows actually Wan-Bissaka's cross was very accurate. But obviously Zaha, under pressure inside the box, could only hit it straight at the keeper. But the fact that Wan-Bissaka is now able to put crosses like that in the box, which beforehand they would just go out for goal kicks or go out and get you sort of intercepted by a Liverpool player or an opposition player. The fact that he's now able to develop it and get it to the striker inside the box is obviously very impressive again. Now, of course, with him getting that 1-match ban, people have been saying 3-match ban, that's terrible. Because it's the last man stat, or the last man you take him down, because that's not violent conduct, that red card counts as only a 1-match ban. So people worrying about it, the FA have confirmed it. It's a 1-match ban, which ultimately means he's going to miss Watford next weekend. Yes, you could say the red card was a bit harsh, but I'd rather him miss one game, with it being Watford, than of course him missing quite a number of other games. Now, of course, Joe Ward is obviously going to come back into the side, and whatever you think about him, he's been a good servant for the club. And certainly when he did come in for Wan-Bissaka a few times last season, other than the Brighton game, I do think he done really, really well. So personally for me, I think Wan-Bissaka is probably going to come straight back into the side. But it does beg the question that actually, because Wan-Bissaka is young, maybe he'll get dropped to the bench for a while. And it does beg the question whether actually, if Joe Ward performs really, really well in Wan-Bissaka's absence, whether Joe Ward might come back into the team. Personally for me, I see it as very unlikely. I think Joe Ward at the moment is a great option to bring off the bench if we need a defensive option, or also just a great backup player, and certainly his experience can help Wan-Bissaka. But personally for me, we're going to miss him quite a lot against Watford, because they've got pace up front, and it would have been nice to have another player in defence who has pace to catch up with the attackers. But also Watford, they've already conceded quite a few goals this season despite their wins, so it shows that at the back they're still not 100% fully sort of solid. So maybe we could have benefited from Wan-Bissaka's attacking contribution and pace, but ultimately we're not going to now. But overall, I do think he's going to be a miss, but certainly a good performance. So Wan-Bissaka here, I've given him an 8, and as I've already said, if he hadn't have got a red card, it probably would have been a 9 out of 10 performance. But once again, a fantastic performance from the youngster, keeping the best front three in the league, bar Man City, keeping them quiet is obviously quite impressive as well. So a good performance from him. So I'm now going to move on to our first of 2 centre-backs, and that is of course James Tompkins. I'm going to give him a 7 because I thought his overall performance was very good. Not necessarily as good as it's been sort of the tail end of last season, but I do think given the fact that he had such hard opposition to play against, I do think that he does deserve that 7. Now, obviously, one of the most frustrating things about the game, yes, we lost 2-0, and personally for me, I predicted we'd lose the game anyway. I predicted a 2-1 loss. We lost 2-0, so close enough. So I personally wasn't too disappointed about losing the game. I was just disappointed in the way we lost the game. And another frustrating thing about the game is the fact that that sort of unbeaten partnership of Tompkins and Sakho, which was 14 games, is obviously now come to an end. You know, they didn't lose a single game in 14 games. It's come to an end now. But personally for me, you still got to look at it and go, the fact that we went that length of time without these two players losing is obviously really quite impressive. But obviously I weren't too disappointed about the result. Obviously how it happened, yes, but obviously this is another thing, sort of just to put a bit more disappointment on the game as a whole. But it does still go to show how good of a partnership it is, in the fact that even though we did lose the game, they were still fairly solid in defence. And even if we lose one game, I'm sure they could continue this sort of unbeaten run going forward. You know, the likes of Watford are coming up. We've got Swansea in the Cup. You know, you've got teams like this who they possibly could continue this unbeaten run, obviously with just a miss in the middle. But even though we've lost this game, say we hit 20 games with only one loss as a partnership, that would obviously once again go to show how good of a partnership it is. But once again, you know, I've talked about the attacking trio of Firmino, Mane and Salah. I think that for much of the game, Tompkins did his very best to keep them quiet. And I do think that actually he done a pretty decent job, kept them quite quiet. And, you know, obviously you've got Sadio Mane and Salah playing on the wings, essentially, and Roberto Firmino up front. So for the majority of the game, it was Firmino who was obviously Sakho and Tompkins' job to mark quite closely. And the fact that Firmino was quite quiet, and obviously that really just destroyed my fantasy team, fantasy Premier League team. But that obviously is good for us. But the fact that he primarily kept Firmino quiet, whilst also when he had to keeping Mane and Salah quiet, was also quite impressive as well. Now, there was one thing in particular which I've seen a few people mention, and obviously is a point that I want to make. It's the fact that I was quite impressed with the improved communication between Tompkins and Hennessy. Now, this was one thing last season. Once again, going back to last season, there's something that at the beginning of the season that seemed to be the problem. You know, there was no communication between the goalkeeper, between the defence, and maybe that's where a few of the problems did spring up from. And obviously, because we had such a bad... Obviously there was loads of problems at the beginning of last season, but maybe that lack of communication was one of them. But that's something that in this game, and I've said it already, loads of people have picked it up, maybe that's one thing that's improved, is actually the communication between the defence, Tompkins in particular, and Wayne Hennessy in goal. And you know, in this game against Liverpool, you're obviously against tough opposition. You know, they're putting lots of pressure on you, so it's quite integral that you have that communication to make sure that A, the goalkeeper's in the right position, and obviously B, the defence is giving you the cover. And the fact that we looked so solid defensively obviously just goes to show how actually that communication did help us throughout the game to remain solid at the back. Now, to be honest, once again, going back to last season, obviously the defence for quite a lot of the season did look quite scared to pass the ball back to Hennessy, mainly because we were obviously losing quite a lot of games, and obviously Hennessy just seemed absolutely drained of confidence. But it does look like now the defence, you know, Tompkins, Sakho like to play the ball out from the back, and it does now look like that James Tompkins in particular likes to use Wayne Hennessy as sort of that passing outlet. So when we're playing the ball out from the back, if we can't go forward, Tompkins is more than happy, you know, to pass the ball back to Hennessy and, you know, start up the attack from that. So the fact that he's now got confidence, or the defence has now got confidence to use Hennessy not only as obviously as the shot stopper, but also to link up playing, you know, start attacks off essentially. That's obviously great to see as well. But to be honest, you know, people sometimes criticise teams that play out from the back. You know, even though Liverpool have the amount of attacking threat they do, it really looked like that Palace were rarely troubled on the ball. So we obviously, lots of other teams against Liverpool, against Man City, just basically park the bus and just hope to get something on the counter-attack. Whereas Palace, we didn't change our system. We played exactly the same system and just remained sort of compact at the back. And that obviously showed, especially in defence, the fact that we rarely looked trouble on the ball, so we could comfortably play the ball out from the back despite playing against the quality of opposition in Liverpool. So obviously that goes to show that actually maybe the Liverpool attackers weren't putting enough pressure on our defence, but also it could just go to show that actually sometimes it's better not to change your system on part of the bus, maybe just play your system, and obviously she'll try and just outdo the Liverpool attackers. And certainly playing out from the back did look, playing out from the back, and obviously the players doing it did look quite comfortable in doing so. But James Tompkins here, centre back, another good performance from him. Obviously quite unlucky to be on the losing side in the fact that he kept that attacking trio quite quiet. But when you go back to it, you look back at the game, and obviously one goal was a penalty, nothing to do with Tompkins, so you can't blame him for that. And obviously the other one was a counter-attack, and Tompkins was up for the corner. So realistically, other than the two goals we conceded, not really Tompkins' fault. So overall, a good performance from him. And like I said already, he was quite unlucky given his performance to be on the losing side. So we're going to move on now to obviously our second centre-back, and that is of course Mamadou Sakho. And much like his centre-back partner in Tompkins, I'm going to give him a 7th for his performance. Now obviously he was the one who gave the penalty away from Salah, and as I've already said, I don't think it was a penalty. You look at it, you look back at the replays. He stuck his leg out, yes, but he tried to get the ball 3 or 4 times. Got the ball on the first few occasions, but Salah is quite close to him, and he's literally nipped him on the knee, and then Salah, once again, very dramatic, drops his head back, waves his hands around, and gets a penalty. Now, last weekend, I talked about it, against Fulham, he was obviously accused of a penalty, and that wasn't given, and certainly that one was probably more of a penalty, if it was a penalty, more of a penalty than the Salah one. But I said, that's sort of a 50-50 one, the referee didn't give it, mainly because both players were sort of going to ground at the same time. Now, obviously, this time round, it was less clear cut, and obviously it was just theatrical skills from Salah. Yes, Mamadou Sakho was marking him quite closely, but what else is he meant to do? People will criticise him if he left Salah loads of space, and then obviously people still criticise him when he gets close to Salah and doesn't give him any space and still gives away the penalty, which, as I've said already, was quite soft. But obviously he left his leg out, and obviously that meant that he obviously tripped over, I say in inverted commas, he tripped over Salah. Obviously, crucial part of the game, just before half-time, James Milner puts that penalty in, and obviously we're 1-0 down at half-time. Now, obviously, I've seen a few people saying it's sort of karma for the fact that we escaped, let's say, without getting a penalty last weekend against Fulham. Maybe that is it, and maybe that's the football gods of way of sort of evening things out. But others may say it's just a big team bias. And, if you look at the referee, Oliver, he actually is given, I think it's 7 penalties in his last 9 games against Liverpool, or refereeing Liverpool games, which just goes to show, maybe it's just coincidence that that's happened, but maybe it does show that sort of big club bias, because I guarantee you that if Wilfried Zaha had done that, everyone would be around him saying diver, diver, diver this, and all over Twitter would explode, people calling him divers. But because Salah does it, and because Salah is obviously God to Liverpool fans, and because he scored 40 odd goals last season, it's not a dive for him, and obviously Salah should be defending better. So personally for me, not a penalty, not necessarily a dive as well, because there's still contact there. But would that be given as a foul anywhere else on the pitch? No, the referee would just either play the advantage or just wave it away. So that once again just goes to show that personally for me it was a very soft penalty. But I do see the argument either way. But personally for me, it is because of the theatrics and because of, yeah, but basically if you look at other penalties that have or haven't been given recently, obviously that just goes to show that actually this shouldn't really have been a penalty. And the people trying to justify it, saying that because Mamadou Sakho stuck his leg out and there was a little touch there, that sort of warrants it. Yes, that's true, let's say, but then Wilfried Zaha goes up the other end of the pitch. If he does that, there'd be massive uproar because of that sort of reputation he's got. So because Salah hasn't got that, and because Salah's a really great player, no one bats an eyelid when he does that. So personally for me, I don't really want to dwell on this too much. But, like I said, I don't want to talk too much about the penalty. But if you do want to have a discussion about it, then of course contact us on Twitter at @eCrystalPalace. Or of course you can comment it below any YouTube comments, and certainly I'm open for a discussion about the penalty decision. But moving away from that, talking about Sakho's performance and why I've given him a 7. If aside from that penalty decision, I think he showed numerous moments of brilliance. There was one time where he literally picked up the ball from the defence, Liverpool players running at him, he spammed past them, sent them for dead, and obviously just played the ball out from the back. So there were moments like that which were great in terms of calmness on the ball and just defending really well against that attacking threat Liverpool had. But then he done his usual sort of silly moments where he gives us a scare or two, where he gives the ball away or he makes a really bad clearance. So we know that. We expect that from Mamadou Sakho. We expect moments from brilliance, and obviously we expect moments of sort of his maverick nature. So certainly in this game there were lots of moments of brilliance, But once again, there were a few moments where he gave us a little bit of a scare. But the reason I've given him a 7 is mainly because there were very few moments to scare us. And obviously there were lots and lots of moments of brilliance from him defending against his old team. Now, one of the things I was quite impressed with, and I talked about it against Fulham last weekend with Tompkins, but the same here with Sakho against Liverpool. I think in the air he was excellent, winning all of the battles. And although the stats may not be there to back it up, if you look at someone like Virgil van Dijk, there's loads of stats about him bossing the air and just doing really, really well in that respect. Although there's not necessarily loads of stats to back this up, I think that Sakho absolutely dominated the air. And because Liverpool, on the few occasions they put the ball in the box, the fact that Sakho was there to head it clear or to just hoof it up the pitch, that's obviously great to see as well. And I think, their front three, basically, Liverpool, they didn't really have that many chances because obviously Sakho was there to show moments of brilliance to obviously clear the ball. And even when he was under pressure, he was sort of the first to the ball, clear the danger. So overall, I do think his overall defensive performance was really good. Now, to be honest, I think if you look at the Liverpool perspective, obviously playing against his former club, players obviously playing against former clubs normally they either do really, really well and obviously the other team regret seeing them leave, or the player just has a bad game because the occasion gets to them. And to be honest, I think this is a performance where Palace fans can be looking at it and going, actually, Liverpool, you've obviously sold us a very good defender. He could have played for you because his performance was so good. And obviously Liverpool fans are thinking, yes, he's had an alright performance, but the only moment of joy we're going to get out of it is the fact that when he went to ground, bringing down Salah, which, as I've already said, was a very soft penalty. But like I said already, overall, Mamadou Sakho's performance here, good partnership with James Tompkins, as we've sort of come to expect. The penalty shouldn't have been given, very, very soft. And if it has been given, then, you've got to look at the Niasse penalty last season and actually go, well, that one, even though there was contact, the FA have said, yes, there was contact there, but it wasn't enough to warrant the way that he reacted. And that's the same in Salah's case. The fact that he threw his hands around, threw his neck back, that obviously just goes to show that he's making it dramatic. And ultimately, it shouldn't have been a penalty. But overall, Mamadou Sakho, I thought he was excellent in the air, excellent at playing the ball out from the back. Had his moments of brilliance as well as moments that scared us as well. But I do think he done a really, really great job when under pressure. Well, immense pressure, really. From that front three, I think he done a really good job. So, Mamadou Sakho here, a 7 for him. So now just to end off with the defence, obviously with the left back Patrick Van Aanholt. Now personally I'm going to give him a 6, and I know this one may be one that might come up for debate, but personally for me I don't think he had a fantastic game, and I certainly don't think he had a terrible game, and I think a 6 for him is pretty average. But I certainly do think, or I don't want people to think as though I thought he had a bad game. I just don't think he was as good, let's say, as some of the other players, as I've already talked about. But to be honest, in terms of Patrick Van Aanholt, this is a sort of purple patch of form for him, because the end of last season he went 3 consecutive games scoring lots of goals. In pre-season he scored a brace, he scored a few other goals, got a few assists as well. So actually the last sort of few games, against Fulham, here against Liverpool again, which is very unlike him, he hasn't scored here or he hasn't got an assist here, but I still do think he had a very sort of tough evening against the Liverpool attackers, and that's probably why he didn't necessarily get as much attacking threat as he would have liked. And to be honest, because of obviously that pressure from Liverpool, their front three of Mane, Salah and Firmino, because of that he basically was forced to do a more traditional fullback role. Now I personally have got nothing wrong with that, because as a fullback your number one priority, or your primary aim of any game is obviously to defend first and attack second. And obviously Van Aanholt's one of these ones who likes to sort of do 50-50 with that, likes to basically attack as much as he defended. But obviously in this game here, because of that pressure from Liverpool, he found himself playing a little bit more deep, a little bit more defensive as he would normally do. But obviously that's how we coped with the Liverpool attack. And I said already about other teams who play Liverpool, they just park the bus. Whereas we tried to play them at their own game. We tried to play the ball out from the back, tried to play expansive football. And ultimately you've got to have some sacrifice with that, because if you're going to play a certain system, 1 or 2 players are going to suffer purely based on the quality, or the more quality, let's say, from the opposition. And certainly that's what Liverpool had. And Van Aanholt was one of these players who, because he was doing so much defending, he didn't really have that much sort of influence going forward as he normally does do. But like I've said already, I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying he had a bad game. I'm just saying that actually defensively he was pretty sound, but obviously he wasn't as effective as he has been in the past. Now obviously Mohamed Salah, I've talked about him already in length, but Patrick Van Aanholt done a relatively good job, as did Wan-Bissaka. with Mane on the other side. But I think Van Aanholt done a fantastic job in terms of basically restricting Salah so much that the only thing he could really play with or really get on the end of was just scraps, so a few sort of loose balls here and there. That's basically what Salah was sort of restricted to down our left hand side, purely based on the fact that Van Aanholt was doing his defensive job really well, and that's exactly what you expect from Van Aanholt. You know, I've talked about it last season in length. You know, he was pretty bad at the beginning of last season. Now he's obviously transformed himself as a player, and certainly these are the sort of things we've come to expect from him now, in terms of, because he's got pace, he can deal with fast wingers, and certainly that's what he's done here against Salah. Now, to be honest, I've talked about him playing a little bit more defensive than he would normally do, and even when he was doing that, I still thought he kept his position well. You know, you often find with players like Salah, Hazard, even people like Harry Kane to a certain extent, world-class players who, when they get into the box, they often find space. And obviously you do often see fullbacks and obviously centre-backs getting pulled out of positions, basically. And obviously that's how these people get their goals. That's why they're so skillful. But I personally thought Van Aanholt, I'm not saying that he's up there as a really, really world-class player, but what I would say is, against a world-class player in Salah, he kept his position really well, didn't let his pace or the pace of Salah sort of overtake him, and he managed to keep up for him for the majority of the game. And he often found himself not drifting out too wide or drifting too narrow, so he kept his position really well, and that's ultimately why he dealt with Salah really, really well. But like I said already, because of this and because he had to play more defensive, it just basically meant that he was less of an attacking outlet as he normally was. Now obviously towards the end of the game he was booked for a needless foul. Yes, obviously that's a deserved yellow card, but then a few minutes later James Milner has a tackle which is probably just as bad or worse than that. Even though he got the ball, it was probably worse than that. It was reckless, feet off the ground, but still that one didn't get booked. So if you are going to book Van Aanholt for that tackle, which I certainly would put my hands up and say, yep, that's fair, that's a yellow card. If you're going to do that, you need a bit of consistency, and you need to book James Milner for the other tackle as well. And you know, James Milner got up after that tackle and tried to sort of blame Will for sort of elbowing or sort of pushing him back down to the ground as he was getting up. Personally, for me, I don't know why he was moaning about that. You know, you've just literally two-footed a player, or almost two-footed a player, to the ground, and obviously they're just sort of using you to get up again. So I don't really see much reason why he was moaning. And like I've said, just goes back to that point about consistency. If you're going to book Van Aanholt for something which is a fair yellow, you've also got to keep up that consistency and obviously book James Milner as well. But Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 6. Not as sort of effective offensively as he usually is, but I still think he done a solid job defensively, kept his position well, and against, you know, one of the form players, one of the best in the world at the minute, Mohamed Salah, he done a really, really good job of keeping him quiet. So a 6 for Van Aanholt here. So I'm now going to move on to the midfield, obviously starting with the captain, Luka Milivojevic. And much like Van Aanholt, I'm going to give him a 6, because I don't necessarily think he was absolutely outstanding in the game, you know, because obviously Liverpool were playing so well. But I don't actually think he was terrible as well. And, you know, as the captain, I do think he led the team really well. And that's a crucial thing. And I mention it every week, and it's probably quite obvious that your captain is obviously the leader of the side and is obviously going to do his captaincy role as well. But I think in this game in particular, where obviously we needed to not let our heads drop after conceding late in the first half, the fact that we came out second half even better and we were playing so well, you've got to give credit to obviously the manager, but also the captain as well, in the fact that we were able to keep up with the sort of momentum and the, you know, trying to sort of keep up the performance levels against Liverpool. The fact that we were able to do that, you've got to give some credit to him. But the biggest thing about Luka's game, which arguably because of this one free kick, you probably could give him a 7. But obviously the most times we looked threatening was either on the counter-attack or from set pieces. So quite a few number of corners came into the area, dangerous deliveries from Luka, obviously threatening that Liverpool backline, which I think is probably one of the shortest in the Premier League, or as a team I think it is. Liverpool collectively are one of the shortest teams. But I do think Luka had really dangerous deliveries from corners. Obviously set pieces as well. So there was one in particular, you know, a fantastic free kick into the area. Luka's curled it top corner right in front of the Homestyle. Sort of a similar position as to Jednak when he had his free kick a few years ago. And obviously it was parried away by Alisson. Now obviously Alisson, he's a great keeper. Obviously they brought him. He's the world's second most expensive goalkeeper now. And obviously he showed his class there. You know, great free kick going into the top corner on obviously a very powerful 2-saved parry away by Alisson. But to be honest, that was all well and good, you know, with Luka in terms of looking threatening from set pieces, corners and corners and free kicks in particular, but he did seem to struggle, and obviously that's quite obvious. You know, when you play against a team as high of a quality as Liverpool, sometimes you're going to struggle, and certainly Luka was one of these players. I think, you know, I always talk about the midfield battle, and I mentioned it quite a lot last season, but the midfield battle is really quite crucial in terms of winning games, and obviously we didn't really have that much domination of the game because of how good someone like Naby Keita was in the centre of midfield. So because of that sort of pressure of the Liverpool midfielders, he really did struggle quite a bit, and he misplaced quite a few passes. Now, that's something which we're not quite familiar with Luka, because normally his passing is absolutely superb, and even if he does misplace a pass, he normally makes up for it, you know, by going back and making the tackle as well. But overall, I do think, you know, obviously I've talked about bad things, you know, in the fact that he weren't necessarily as impactful, let's say, as he has been in past weeks, but I still do think his cover for the defence was solid as ever. You know, we always know in front of the defence, playing in midfield, he plays that role very deep, give protection to the back four. He done that job superbly. You know, we always expect that, but obviously, you know, when we pressed for an equaliser, you know, we whipped in that corner into the box. It was quite inevitable that with a player being sent off and the fact that players were up for the corner, it was obvious that there were going to be gaps, and obviously Liverpool exploited that, hit us on the counter-attack, and ultimately that's why they scored. So realistically, like I've said with like I said with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, in terms of the fact that if you take the red card away, he'd have a fantastic performance. The same could be said for Luka. You know, if you get rid of not necessarily the red card, but if you get rid of that final goal of the game and it ends 1-0, you could say actually Luka probably deserves a 7, based on the fact that his defensive cover was absolutely solid throughout the whole game, done really, really well protecting the back four, and it was only a dodgy penalty which saw us go behind. So once again, it's just little moments, game-changing moments, which could affect a player's performance, or obviously affect, you know, what sort of rating I give them. But I personally think, you know, much like what I said with Villano, you know, I'm not going to... I know it sounds like I'm criticising Luka because obviously he hadn't had a good game as some of the other players, but I don't want it to come across that way. I still think he done his job, but obviously not as good as we know he can do, or he has done recently. But Luka Milivojevic here, the captain, 6 for him. Few decent deliveries from set pieces, especially one free kick in particular, which Alisson obviously had to parry away from the top corner. Other than a few missed passes here and there, I do think his cover for the defence was solid as ever, and obviously a solid performance overall from him. So now move on to obviously the partner in midfield, and that was James McArthur. I'm going to give him a 6 as well, and as you can see, the sort of last few players, pretty average performances, and I do think are deserving of a 6. Now obviously in my match preview I did predict McArthur to start, because, you know, we always know Roy Hodgson likes to stick with a winning lineup, and obviously quite rare you see this these days, but both teams were unchanged going into the game. Now lots of fans were saying that Cheku Kouyaté or Max Meyer should come into the game, just because we looked a bit sort of open in midfield against Fulham, and certainly with the threat that Liverpool has, you think, yeah, maybe we should pack out the midfield. But Roy Hodgson stuck with his guts, stuck with the winning side, and actually it did come across quite well. And, you know, I've mentioned it already, you know, when you play top teams, it's not just about parking the bus and see whether you could get something on the counter-attack. It's sometimes just about playing your normal system, playing the opposition at their own game, rather than changing it to suit them. And that's what you've got to do. And it certainly worked for us, because I thought McArthur done really, really well. And to be honest, I think the amount of bodies we had in the central third of the field, so the fact that we had a 4-4-2, so we had 4 players in that sort of central third, because of that I think Liverpool were the team that sort of seems to struggle to adapt to it, because they're normally used to seeing teams sort of 4-3-3, so they've got 3 players in midfield, matches up to their 3 players that they normally play in midfield, but obviously they seem to struggle to sort of adapt because of the amount of bodies had in that sort of central third of the pitch. And that's basically because we had McArthur and Luka sitting, Jeffrey Supp and Andrew Townsend sort of coming in slightly narrow, and because of that obviously we had one extra man in that sort of midfield area, and obviously that meant that they did struggle to adapt. Now that's not to say that Liverpool had, or they didn't have that midfield battle, it's just the fact that Palace were just made it slightly harder for them, because certainly Liverpool, much like Palace have been, you know, last season, struggled to get into games from the start and slowly grow into it, and you know, that's certainly Liverpool's case here, where they struggled to start with because of obviously how many bodies we had in midfield, but slowly obviously they grew into the game. But But to be honest, I think McArthur was one of the key players in that midfield, and certainly because of that I could have given him a 7, but I think a 6 is fair. But you know, he was one of the players who was preventing Liverpool from playing their natural game. So things that he stopped them doing is things like sort of intercepting some of their predictable passes and quite regularly, you know, getting the better of 50-50 balls. And that's something that obviously meant that we had the upper hand at points against Liverpool. Now, as we saw with Man City last year, where we obviously drew 0-0, when you go toe-to-toe or head-to-head with teams of that quality, sometimes you can get the better of them. And certainly McArthur was one of these players who, even though we were playing our same system against higher quality players, you know, if the players each do their role properly, they can actually have the better hand of the more quality players. And that's exactly what we saw with McArthur here. You know, we know from him, he normally plays slightly further forward and Lucas stays back, but because of that pressure from Liverpool, he played slightly further back. And like I've said, he, you know, was really, really good, as was Luka, in protecting the back four, you know, getting rid of these passes and obviously winning the 50-50 balls as well. And McArthur isn't the tallest player, but the fact that he's still able to get the better, you know, of these 50-50 situations is obviously great to see as well. Now, to be honest, I said it already and I'll say it again, Liverpool have got quality, and it was quite inevitable that eventually, you know, like I've said, they started a little bit slowly. Once they got into the game, it was quite inevitable that, you know, they would slowly get the better of the midfield, and certainly that was the case. And obviously, as the game went on, McArthur had slightly less impact, purely based on the fact that Liverpool were dominating the game, and he didn't get to have much say going forward, or didn't necessarily have many chances in that final third. And that's something we've seen from McArthur quite a lot, in the fact that Luke will stay back quite defensive, quite, you know, basically almost in line with the back four. And obviously that means that McArthur goes slightly further forward and is sort of the player playing in behind the two strikers with Wilf and Benteke. Now, obviously, once again, because Liverpool dominating possession, playing their high press, because of that, it meant that he didn't necessarily get as many chances going forward as he would normally get. But I still don't think that sort of hindered his performance so much, mainly because of the fact that he was intercepting passes and just doing, you know, winning the 50-50 balls as well. And sometimes that's what you expect from players. They may not necessarily be playing as good as they can be, but if they just, you know, do their job there, don't put a foot wrong, and just give their all for the team, that's really what is important. And certainly that's what we got from McArthur here. But James McArthur here, playing alongside Luka in defensive midfield, a good performance from him. Certainly made it difficult for Liverpool at the start, and slowly as Liverpool got back into the game, obviously he saw his sort of influence on the game dwindle a bit. Certainly I've given him a 6. I don't think it could be fair, it could not be, I don't know, I could have given him a 7, but I do think a 6 fair result. So now I'm going to move on to our third player in our midfield, and obviously that is the left mid Jeffrey Slop. I'm going to give him a 6 for this game, because I don't think, once again, as I said with the last few plays, I don't think he was necessarily fantastic, and I don't necessarily think he was bad at all. And certainly against a quality opposition as Liverpool, and considering the fact that he's obviously got that momentum from scoring a goal against Fulham, obviously you can understand this game was either going to go two ways, in the fact that he was just going to peter out, and obviously he was just going to have an average performance, or he was going to continue that form and have an absolutely outstanding performance. And he sort of had something in the middle there. Now, before the game, myself included, you know, there was quite a lot of debate as to whether he would start the game. You know, people were saying that McArthur would probably be put on the left hand side and someone like Kiyate or Max Meyer would be brought in, and that was basically just to pack out the midfield. So we would have 3 midfielders, and obviously have Andros Townsend playing on the right. So we'll basically still play a 4-4-2, but rather than us just having 2 central midfielders, 2 wingers, we'd have 3 central midfielders and 1 winger. And obviously, in terms of Liverpool getting overrun in the midfield, by having that extra midfielder or that central midfielder, obviously that would just give us a bit more protection and a bit more control over possession and the midfield battle and stuff like that. Now, in the end, Roy Hodgson, as I've already mentioned, he doesn't often change a winning lineup. So of course he went with the same lineup as he did against Fulham. And actually, Jeffrey Slop, you can't necessarily say he done anything bad. You can't say he done anything necessarily good, and that's why I do think he's worth the 6. Now, to be honest, you know, he is a very versatile player, and once again, that ability to play anywhere is obviously proved quite crucial, because not only did he play a role going forward in the fact that he was quite creative, not necessarily great in terms of his decision making, but the fact that he was able to get forward and get in positions was good. But also the fact that he can play anywhere and still had that vital defensive role, in the fact that because of Liverpool's threat on our left hand side, it often meant that he often found himself in the first half playing as an extra left back. So most of the time, you know, Jeffrey Slop and Patrick Van Aanholt were playing as a double sort of left back, and basically meant that we were playing with a back five, and basically because of that, because of Slopp's ability and adaptability to play anywhere, that obviously came into good use there. And you know, I've talked quite a lot in depth already about the threat that Liverpool has in the fact that they've got that terrible front three, that terrorising front three. You know, you've got skill, you've got pace, you've got goals, everything you would want from a front three. And of course Jeffrey Slopp, because of that, he obviously had to drift back a bit, play a bit more deeper, but ultimately that sort of overlap he sort of gives, or that sort of extra man he gave in defence, obviously proved quite crucial. Now of course he probably had one of Palace's best opportunities to score. I say probably because we had a few chances, but you would say that his chance he had was probably one of our best opportunities to score. Obviously he came in from wide, striking it. It was quite ambitious, you know, in terms of far out and at angle, and the fact that there were players in the box. But the fact that he's taken an effort obviously shows that he's got a little bit more confidence, having scored last weekend, but also showing that, yes, he can do that defensive work as he showed in this game, but also when he does go forward, despite not playing forward for quite a lot of his career, he's still got that idea and got that sort of eye for a pass or an eye for a shot as well, which is obviously good to see. Now, to be honest, he did sort of, if you're looking at his game, that's quite positive. You know, his defensive work he's doing, and obviously the work ethic, and obviously the fact that he had one of Palace's, we didn't have many opportunities, but he had one of our few opportunities, and that's all great. But the reason I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7 is just the fact that he struggled to get any real sort of influence in the game like he did against Fulham. And then basically, as I've already mentioned, Liverpool was so great, and obviously because of their team was so good and so dominant in the game, basically meant someone like Jeffrey Slopp couldn't really have any real influence in the game. And the reason the defenders played so well is because they were constantly being battered. They constantly were fighting back and defending really well against it, whereas the midfielders and the attackers didn't necessarily have that great a game, purely based on the fact that we were worrying too much about their attacking threat, that going forward we didn't really have that sort of impetus, or so we didn't look like we had any direction, let's say, going forward. But Jeffrey Slopp here, some may argue you probably should get a 7, some may even say a 6 is a fair result, but I've given him a 6 here, once again, because of that vital defensive role he played, whilst also having one of our best opportunities to score. But I personally did think coming into the game that he would bring his confidence and have another good game playing out wide, and you know, will prove to be one of our biggest attacking threats. He didn't necessarily live up to that and live up to, you know, the fantastic performance he put in against Fulham, but certainly a good performance nevertheless. Not great, not terrible. I do think a 6 is a fair reflection, let's say, of his overall performance. But do feel free, obviously, to comment with your views and obviously what you think about Jeffrey Slopp's performance, and whether you do actually think that in the 4-4-2 formation, maybe that sort of left mid position may actually be the best position, which obviously suits his style of play. But once again, good performance from what is a versatile play. So now we're going to move across from the left hand side to the right hand side with Andros Townsend. Now obviously other podcasts don't really like to promote other podcasts, but if you have got the chance, listen to the 5-year plan podcast as well, obviously because they had Troy Townsend, obviously Andros Townsend's dad, on there, and he gave a really interesting insight into not only the game as a whole, you know, in terms of looking at Townsend's performance in particular, but also Townsend's wider Palace career. So if you do want an insight into that, and obviously the struggles at the beginning and how he's developed under certain managers, do give it a listen, because certainly it was a great listen for me, and actually it was really interesting to find out things which we sort of knew a little bit about, but to get it in a bit more context and to learn a few things was obviously very interesting as well. And obviously do follow Troy Townsend on Twitter as well, because he's quite active on there and often does do quite a lot of work for charities. So certainly I think Kick Out in particular, certainly do give him a follow on there. But obviously Andros Townsend, I've given him a 7 here for his performance, and much like what you hear from the man himself, or his dad himself, it was a very good performance from him. And you know, like I've already said, Liverpool, because that we were constantly being attacked by them, we obviously spent more time defending than we did attacking. But the few chances we did get going forward, and certainly in that second half where we certainly got a very good we dominated various parts of it, I do think we've done really well. Now in the first half it seemed like sort of no one from Palace was causing more issues than Townsend. You know, I think that Liverpool were defending quite well, as were Palace, and obviously that restricted both teams' attacking chances. And the fact that Liverpool had to score from a goal in the last minute when we had a player sent off on the counter-attack, and obviously their first goal came from a penalty, it just shows that actually relatively I think it was a very good defensive game from both teams, as most attacking players were obviously restricted. But I think in the first half, Townsend by far was our biggest attacking threat, and he was probably one of our only players who seemed to be able to get past Andy Robertson. Now, he's been absolutely fantastic, you know, back end of last season, coming into this season, and certainly up against someone like Andros Townsend, it was going to be a tricky thing, and I think that he dealt relatively well, you know, Robertson with certain players, but Townsend in particular, in that first half, he did seem to struggle quite a lot with him, and obviously it just ultimately meant that Townsend, you know, had a bit more freedom than, let's say, some of the other attacking players who did seem to struggle, obviously, against that Liverpool defence. Now, the main reason I've given him a 7 is, yes, his performance was good, but his shot where he cut inside, I think it was from a Benteke flick on, and absolutely walloped it from about 25 yards out, and it slams, it's a lovely looping effort just outside the box, and it sort of dips down and comes off the bar, or yeah, the bar. He was just absolutely fantastic, and you know, looking back at the game, even at the game, people were looking at that thinking, fantastic shot, and we were so unlucky that he didn't go in, because if you listen to the match report before the game, or sorry, before at the beginning of the podcast, I basically said that he was basically grasping for thin air, basically, the goalkeeper, because he was beaten, because he was just off his line, and Townsend literally just looped it, and he was very, very, very unlucky that that didn't go top corner, because the loop was there, the power was there, and the fact that he got it away from the goalkeeper made it a perfect shot, and obviously it was just unlucky for him that he went off the crossbar. But, you know, like I've said already, you know, we know Townsend can shoot from distance, and as shown there, that when he gets the chance and when he can shoot, he can get them on target. So we just need to see a bit more from him, because when he first joined Palace, I criticised him for just being a bit too greedy and just shooting every time he got the ball, and obviously they were going left, right and centre. Then he'd done the complete opposite by not even shooting at all, and now we're seeing in glimpses that he's starting to make better decisions, let's say, when to shoot, when to cross, when just to hold on to possession. And certainly this one, in this game in particular, it would have been nice to see him just take a few more shots, because when he got himself into a good area, he had a shot and it came off the crossbar, so it would have been a bit nicer for him to, you know, have a few more shots. And certainly that's something that his dad brought up in the 5-year plan podcast, and basically said sometimes we know he's got a good foot on him, you know, both left and right, so maybe it's just better for him sometimes just to shoot from outside the box, because as shown by the shot against Liverpool, he has actually got that ability to shoot from distance. Now, of course, in the second half, much like many players, you know, you talk about a game of two halves. I think in the first half, Townsend was by far our most attacking player, one of our best players on the field. In the second half, I think he sort of had a lesser half, let's say a 6 overall for his second half performance. First half, probably a 7/8 maybe. But obviously, he found himself having less opportunity in that second half, probably because Townsend was being marked a lot more by Robertson, and obviously because we played a few yards further back, because of that pressure that Liverpool were putting us under, it basically meant that when we went forward, because we were already a few yards back, it meant that we couldn't really hurt the opposition too much, because we were already in quite a deep position. And to be honest, because of that, and because Townsend and Slupp and they were playing quite deep, and because Benteke was sort of getting involved in the play, because of that, it only really left Zaha in that sort of out and out attacking role to chase down some of the balls over the top, and obviously the counter-attacking balls when we were on the counter-attack. So really, because of that, and because obviously we were under the cosh, under pressure, it ultimately meant in that second half that we played a few yards back, and obviously players like Townsend couldn't necessarily have that much influence in the game. But the fact still remains that actually Townsend, the main reason I've given him a 7 is because of that shot off the crossbar, and if that had gone in, that would have been goal of the season already. That competition's finished. Fantastic goal, and obviously it would have, I think it would have made it 1-0 to Palace at the time, and it could have changed the whole complexion of the game. So you could say, yes, it's unlucky that he's hit it off the crossbar and, you know, we went on to lose, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Or you could look at it and go, yes, it was unlucky, but if he had scored that, it could have changed the whole complexion of the game. So there's two different views there. And I personally take the one that, if that had gone in, so the second view, if that had gone in, it probably could have changed the game. He would have been 1-0 up, and maybe something different would have happened in the game. But Andros Townsend here, another good performance from him. Probably give him a 7/8 for his first half performance, a 6 for his second half performance, because it wasn't as great as the first, but that's mainly because Palace were under the cosh. So overall, Andros Townsend, a good performance from the right winger, and a fully deserved 7. So now I'm going to move on to the first of our two forwards, and that is of course Wilfried Zaha. Now he was one of these players who had a relatively quiet game, in the fact that, purely based on the fact that Liverpool defended so well, so he really was restricted with the amount of chances he had. So realistically, I can't give him anything higher than sort of a 6, purely based on the fact that his chances were restricted, and the few chances he did get, they were sort of equal to the goalkeeper, so there isn't really necessarily much really to talk about in that respect. But what I've got to say is that Joe Gomez, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Virgil van Dijk, they were fantastic throughout the whole evening, and certainly someone else on the left hand side, Robertson, he got me loads of fantasy team points because of the clean sheet. So in terms of a consolation for the Palace loss, my fantasy football team did do really well. But these three players in particular done a fantastic job. You know, Gomez, Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk done a fantastic job in terms of marking Wilfried Zaha and basically making it a hard evening for him, because they know he's our talisman, and if you can stop him, it obviously sort of limits the chances we have. Now, taking him out of the team, yes, it makes it very hard for us. Doesn't necessarily mean it's impossible for us to have some sort of attacking threat, but of course it makes it quite difficult for us to get into the game. And obviously because they were marking him really well and just basically taking him out of the game, it basically made it hard for Zaha just to stamp his authority on the game and obviously just have as much influence like he did last week. And you know, we saw last week where if you give him a chance, he'll finish off that chance and punish the team, whereas here Liverpool, a lot more experienced defence, and obviously didn't give him the chance to catch onto a mistake, or didn't give him the chance to obviously run in behind because they were defending so well. Now, much like Andros Townsend, I think his first half was a lot better than his second half. In the first half, I thought his service was decent, so not only was his performance good, but I thought the service to him, because we were playing quite relatively well, we were passing the ball around nicely, the service to him was great, and there was one cross in particular from Wan-Bissaka, which I've already talked about. But obviously, as the game went on, so he was more reliant on running with the ball itself, and that's purely based on the fact that Palace were playing more deeper. And because we were playing more deeper, it obviously meant that we lost a few yards, and because of that, it meant that it was a lot harder to break down the Liverpool defence because they play that high press. So it basically meant that we were just giving them the area which basically we would occupy, and because we were playing so deep, it ultimately meant that when we were playing the ball out from the back, we obviously just have to sort of lump it long or get it to Zaha, and he has to sort of carry it forward, as opposed to maybe some of the wingers, so the likes of Slop and Townsend, just carrying the ball out wide and crossing it in. Because obviously Liverpool were playing so well, putting us under pressure, it basically meant that we just had to give the ball to Zaha for him to run past players, as opposed to other players in the Palace midfield and attack sort of breaking through as well. And to be honest, yes, it's not good, or it's not great that although we were playing good in the first half, in the second half we just resorted to giving the ball to Zaha and for him just to run with it. But basically that's all we could do, because the Liverpool defence was well drilled, and obviously Wilfried Zaha had lots less, you know, he had little support. Because he had little support is basically why he didn't have that many chances in the second half. So I talked about decent service in the first half, he had loads of chances, looked good, including that cross from Wan-Bissaka. But in the second half, in contrast, when he didn't have any service is when obviously he weren't looking as good. But then that's mainly because obviously the defence were well drilled and were able to deal with him really well. Now obviously we've got to give him credit, because recently, you know, in sort of past seasons gone by, he does get quite frustrated in games when he doesn't get involved or when there's not enough service to him. But obviously in this game didn't really look quite frustrated, and even in the last few minutes he sort of kept his calm and almost looked like he could grab an equaliser. So obviously coming into sort of the 80th to the 90th minute, that sort of period before Liverpool scored their second goal, we were putting in quite a lot of pressure, and certainly Zaha was one of these players who could have grabbed an equaliser late in the game. Ultimately he didn't, but the fact that he wasn't necessarily brilliant for that second half and still managed to keep his frustration down and still managed to almost get a chance, of course you've got to take positives from that. But overall, I do think it's not necessarily as good as a performance as we saw against Fulham last weekend, but I personally think that's mainly down to the quality of the opposition we were playing. I'm certainly sure if we had played Fulham again, or a team like Fulham, the way they set up, if we played them again, maybe Zaha would have had more joy. But because of how experienced and how well drilled, and basically just how high the quality is of that Liverpool defence and midfield in front of them, obviously thought it was quite difficult for him. But Wilfried Zaha here, good first half, slightly worse second half, a 6 for him. So I'm now going to finish off with the starting 11 with the fellow striker and partner of Wilfried Zaha, and of course that is Christian Benteke, playing in that forward role alongside Wilf. Now I am going to give him a 5 because I think his performance was slightly disappointing, but that's not to say I thought it was absolutely terrible. I just think in comparison to Zaha, who was also restricted, I think that Benteke could have done slightly more. Now I've seen a few people absolutely ridicule his performance, absolutely slate him on Twitter, you know, for his performance, but actually I think some of that sort of criticism is unwarranted, purely based on the fact that he did what he could, but ultimately nothing did come from it. Now to be honest, I've talked about the Benteke-Zaha partnership quite a lot last season, but against Fulham it was very good, and certainly there were signs of sort of decent link-up play once again here against Liverpool, and most of the time that sort of link-up play included knocking the ball down, or Benteke heading or knocking the ball down, and obviously controlling it and passing it to Zaha, and Zaha running into the area and getting it to Benteke. So there were signs of decent link-up play, and that was particularly against Fulham, but it still looked alright here against Liverpool. And to be honest, I've seen quite a lot of people, and pundits included, suggest that they're starting to gel together as a partnership, and we certainly saw that against Fulham once again. But actually in this game here it wasn't as great, but we still saw it in bits where actually this partnership could work. Now the main reason the partnership didn't look as good as it did last weekend is basically because they had little opportunity to work together against this Liverpool side, purely based on the fact that Liverpool were defending so well, and obviously because they were attacking so well as well, we obviously didn't have that many chances offensively because we were mainly concentrating on that defensive job. But honestly, I would say that partnership does look good, and hopefully Benteke, who's looked good towards the end of last season, in pre-season and against Fulham in particular, because he's looked good there, hopefully he can carry on that sort of performance there and carry on and bring that confidence with him, because certainly, although he isn't scoring goals, he's definitely putting in good performances. Now this one wasn't necessarily a good performance, but I do think, even though it was another sort of under par performance, I do think there's good things to come. And I certainly think for him and for his sake, I think as soon as he scores one goal, it'll be sort of a domino effect, and his form will all come back and he starts scoring goals again. But until that day, I think he might struggle a little bit more. But the main reason he did struggle, obviously against Liverpool on Monday night, is basically because of how good they were defensively. I have no shadow of a doubt, as I said, against about a few other players. I've said that if we had been playing against a team like Fulham again, I certainly think they would have had a lot more freedom and would have played a lot better. But because we were playing, basically against opposition of the quality of Liverpool, it obviously meant, especially our attacking players, obviously were restricted to what they could do. Now, to be honest, in this game here, I think his overall link-up play was good, what he could do. Ultimately, because the service was bad, he couldn't really do too much. But the only real main problem I saw with him was just, I think it was only pace seemed to cause them any issues. So the Liverpool defence, because Benteke doesn't necessarily have all the pace, but he still has a bit of pace, that was mainly the real only issue that he really caused to that Liverpool back line, because obviously they're fast, but they're not necessarily the quickest. But to be honest, I think his sort of trademark knockdowns, they were quite easy to deal with. But once again, this sort of Benteke-Zaha partnership still brewing up, and the fact that Benteke is winning these knockdowns, yes, not all of them are getting to another player, but the fact that he's now winning them, he just needs to improve with these flick-ons, and certainly it would, improve his performances, let's say, put it that way. Now, we had a couple of efforts on goal, which is great, because we were being restricted to so little chances as possible. It was quite integral and important that when you did get a chance, you obviously go forth and go and take it. Unfortunately, in Benteke's case, it didn't quite happen for him. He had a few, spectacular efforts on goal. Probably should have done better with them, but obviously didn't, and nothing came from them. But there was one in particular where he made a fantastic touch, long ball forward, touched it down, brought the ball dead, spam past the defender, and obviously he must have panicked. He was outside the box, thought, oh, here I'm in space, and he literally absolutely rifled it, put loads of power into it, and it went and ballooned over into the Holmesdale stand. So realistically, he did get himself into some good positions, but maybe it was just a panic, or maybe it's just the fact that he still hasn't scored a goal in a while. That's obviously still playing on his mind, and he just wants to score a goal, and sort of just took it too fast and just should have taken his time with it rather than just hammer it to goal. But overall, Christian Benteke here, a 5 for him. Not as good as, say, Zaha in that sort of partnership up front, but I still think he done a good job in terms of, causing problems with his, pace and his knockdowns. Obviously, didn't really lead to anything, but I think you could expect that from the whole team, considering how well Liverpool were playing both defensively and offensively. But like I said already, there are glimpses of him improving, and although he's not getting goals, he's still contributing to the team offensively, which is good. But we just need to see a few more goals from him and a few more chances that when he does get through on goal, he takes them a lot better rather than just sort of rifling them into the stand like he did here against Liverpool. But once again, that partnership up front seems to be gelling together, and hopefully in the next few games, with the opposition getting slightly easier when you compare it to Liverpool, hopefully he'll get a few more chances going forward, and hopefully that will sort of overall help to improve, basically improve his confidence, because that's what's low at the minute. So I'm just going to move on to the subs now, just briefly talk about them, because no one really had that much of an impact. But Alexander Sorloth, I'll probably give him a 6, because he came on with about 20 minutes to go. Obviously, he was quite a similar player to Benteke in terms of very physical, your target man, and basically that's why Benteke was taken off, is just to sort of a man for man, keep up fitness, and basically just to sort of try something different. And in certain respects, or in many respects, they're very similar players, and that's why it was a good swap. But obviously he had a very similar problem, Sorloth. When he came on, although he was obviously causing a few problems to that Liverpool defence, he basically had the similar problem to Benteke in the fact that that defence was too hard to crack, and obviously we weren't able to take advantage of any sort of gaps or whatever they left. And although that was the case, he weren't really playing that good offensively, he did actually come quite deep quite a few times and just help out in the midfield, which is obviously great as well. So you don't just want your players playing, or your strikers just playing up front and just sort of being isolated. You want them to get involved in the play, and that's what Sorloth did. And there was a great chance to equalise again, you know, ball into the box. He probably, rather than just standing static, he should have just stuck a leg out. Even if it deflects out and you get a goal kick, it's much better to at least try and attempt to get on the end of the cross, as opposed to just sort of leaving it because you think you're not going to get it. Because I personally would much rather see a player try and at least attempt to get on the end of a ball to get that equaliser, as opposed to, like I've said, just standing there. Obviously Max Meyer, I've given him a 7. I think when he came on, he looked very sharp, and even though he came on with just 10 minutes to go, he still had a little bit of an influence on the game, and the fact that he looked good and is giving us sort of hope for what we could see in the future. But there was a massive applause from the Homestead when he came on, and rightly so, because obviously he's a big signing for us. And obviously he was on a free, but in terms of just the name and the reputation, it's a great signing for us. He did look quite sharp, as I've already said, and obviously that's great for us in terms of the fact that he hasn't had much of a pre-season, yet he looks almost ready for the Premier League. And I certainly do think with his quality, I think maybe he could come into the squad in the place of someone like MacArthur, because what I saw, you know, on display there was a very good sort of central midfielder who had his chances going forward and just sort of up the sort of energy levels and just quality on the ball on the field. So obviously that's a great thing as well. Now Roy Hodgson said that he probably should have got a penalty. Roy said that in his press conference. I don't really know. I don't really think that was a penalty thing, but I think the only reason Roy said that we should have had a penalty at the other end is basically in spite of Liverpool, because they got their controversial penalty, which should have been a penalty. So realistically, looking at that, I can understand why Roy said that, but I don't really see it personally. And actually, if you are going to sort of say that you should have had a penalty in spite of Liverpool, there was one, I think it was in either the first or second half, quite early on, where obviously one of our players is taken down in the box, and if you're going to give the one for Salah, you've got to give that other one up the field. And now I apologise that I can't remember exactly who it was or when it was, but there was another sort of basically goal scoring chance. Someone's taken down in the box, even though it's basically the same as that Salah penalty, it doesn't get given. So once again, showing that inconsistency. If you're going to give one penalty, you've got to give the other one, or you just don't give either. So once again, that inconsistency with the refereeing. Once again, just to finish off with the subs, Joe Ward, I've given him a 6. Obviously, once Wan-Bissaka was sent off, we're down to 10 men. We had to bring someone on just to shore up the defence and just make sure that we were playing with a back four and there was no spaces to exploit. Joe Ward came on, can't really fault him for anything. I do think a 6 is a fair result. He looked fairly solid, and considering we basically quite a lot of the time sort of moan about Joe Ward not having that attacking influence, he actually put in one threatening cross in particular, which we almost scored from, which just shows actually on his day, we're trying to chase the game. He can, or he has got that quality to put the ball in the box. So he's going to start the next game against Watford because of Wan-Bissaka's ban and his sending off. So hopefully we can see more of that, because that's something that one of the reasons why I wanted Joe Ward dropped for Wan-Bissaka is basically because Wan-Bissaka's got that attacking impetus. So if Joe Ward, in the few games he's playing whilst Wan-Bissaka's suspended, if he can just come into the side and just put in threatening crosses like he did in the last sort of 10 minutes or so here against Liverpool, that of course would be great to see. But overall, I do think the fact that we conceded on the counter-attack, even though we brought on another defender, once again, you can't really blame too much on Joe Ward, but you could argue maybe he should have done better there. But once again, I'm not going to put too much blame on him because he just came on the field once we were down to 10 men, so there's not really too much to talk about there. Now, of course, just to sort of summarise the game, obviously we knew it was a 2-0 defeat, but if you look at the game as a whole, neutrals looking at the game would probably say that was an easy game for Liverpool, but actually the game was a lot closer than the scoreline suggested. You know, you've got one dodgy penalty decision, in my opinion, which, if that hadn't have happened, it would have been 0-0 at half-time, maybe a different story, and even if it did finish 1-0, I would have been happy because we played well, we had our own chances, and obviously it was just one quality goal at the end of the game which ultimately saw us lose the game. So personally for me, the scoreline was a lot closer than it suggested, and certainly I think it was a red card, but it wasn't a penalty. So ultimately it probably should have finished 2-0, but going in at half time at 0, maybe that would have changed the game. Now, to be honest, most of the headlines, you know, we see the back pages, it's either about Mohamed Salah and, you know, whether he dived or not, and obviously Wan-Bissaka getting sent off. Now, obviously these are two key moments from the game, so understandably they have to be highlighted. Obviously Salah, he should have been, he should have, you know, not, he basically should have been booked for diving, because obviously that shouldn't have been a penalty. And obviously Wan-Bissaka, in my opinion, was rightly sent off. But aside from them talking points, which are understandable, you've got to look at the Palace performance and go, actually, everyone expected Liverpool to play well, so you can't really talk about their performance being good. But no one expected Palace to play as good as we did. So that, once again, that should be the talking point. And that's what should be highlighted, in the fact that we put in such a good performance against a side who completely obliterated West Ham's defence last weekend. And that once again goes to show that actually, you know, West Ham brought loads of players, spent loads of money. That doesn't always mean you'll get success. So once again, Palace, spending conservative amount of money, can still put in good performances, and that's what needs to be highlighted, in the fact that against a team who are playing really, really well at the moment, we obviously managed to almost hold them if it weren't for a few dodgy Premier League refereeing decision. Now, just to finish off, I want to finish off with Gary Neville's comments. He said he can see Palace finishing 7th or 8th if we play like this all season, and certainly under Roy Hodgson, certainly sort of the last, maybe let's say 10 to 15 games of the season, certainly in that period we saw lots of consistency under Roy. And if basically if the league had only been 31 games long, Palace would have finished 7th anyway. So if we can carry on this form, I don't see any reason why Gary Neville's prediction can't be right, because the fact that we can play against a title contending Liverpool side as good as this and play so well against them like we did, obviously proves that we've got the quality to play against a top 6 team, which obviously means if you can play like this against them and only marginally lose, it means that if we play as good as this against other teams, we should have a chance ultimately to finish 6th or 8th. But I'm not going to get too happy yet, because obviously anything can happen in the season. But hopefully, with the momentum we've got at the minute and the fact that we're playing well, hopefully more good performances are to come, and hopefully we will be able to obviously match Gary Neville's prediction. So now I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match award, but before I do that, I give you my Man of the Match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game, and now I'm going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. And obviously you can understand, after a 2-0 loss, if you're looking at that as a neutral, you're going to think it was a pretty bad performance from Palace. We were quite easily beaten by a team of Liverpool's quality. But actually, if you look at the game as a whole, actually Palace put in a really good performance, and actually the scoreline doesn't really reflect the game itself. Though actually, because of that, there were quite a few players, you know, the number of players I'm going to, you know, go through now, that actually did put in very good performances, and these players you can pick out and actually go, they were quite unlucky to be on the losing side because their performances were top quality. Now, in terms of the 4 names I've put down, I've put Wayne Hennessy in goal. In defence, I've put Aaron Wan-Bissaka and James Tompkins, and of course I've put Andros Townsend, the winger, in my shortlist. Now, in terms of why I've put Wayne Hennessy in there, once again, like he did against Fulham last weekend, he was solid again, put in some lovely fine stops, including a one-on-one with Salah, another one for Mane. So not only was Hennessy making the routine saves, but also he was making sure that he could make good saves as well when he was one-on-one with certain players. And even though he spilled a few of his goal kicks, I still do think his overall performance was very good, and certainly in the player ratings I think he was fully deserving of the 8, and certainly also does deserve to be on the shortlist as well, because he was one of our key players in the fact that he kept the game as it was, because it could have been a rugby scoreline. You know, you got the quality that, even though we performed well as a team, but if a few of his routine saves had gone in, or a few of his saves from Salah had gone in, or even the ones on Mane had gone in, we'll be looking at an even bigger scoreline, and you could say actually quite disappointing, not as good Not a good overall team performance, but actually the fact that Hennessy was able to make these saves at crucial moments to keep us in the game is obviously why he's on the shortlist. Now, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, it's really quite odd that a player who got sent off could arguably be one of Palace's best players. Obviously, I'll go on to talk about who I thought the man of the match was, but Wan-Bissaka was absolutely quality in this game. Every tackle he made, other than the one that got him sent off, was absolutely superb. He kept the front three of Liverpool quiet for the majority of the game, and just overall, just another fine performance. Sadio Mane in particular, he was marking primarily on that side, or on the right hand side, or Palace's right hand side. He was, doing really well in terms of restricting him and just going forward. Against Fulham, he obviously got that confidence from getting the assist for Zaha's goal. So this game, he had a bit more freedom, was getting forward quite a lot, and obviously he was just proved to be the extra man for Palace. So he'd given us the other option going forward, which of course helped us in terms of we didn't have that many attacking chances. So when we did, having the extra man obviously helped us further up the pitch. James Tompkins, for the majority of the game, he was absolutely superb. I thought, considering he's got the likes of Firmino, Mane and Salah to keep quiet, he did a fantastic job in doing that, and he just overall done a decent job. So for his defensive contribution and the fact that he was still threats from set pieces and things like that, that's why he's on the shortlist. And for me, it was between Sakho and Tompkins, because both their defensive performances were very good and they restricted the front three of the opposition. But for the basic fact that Sakho, even though I think it shouldn't have been a penalty, the fact that he gave away the penalty is why Tompkins gets in the shortlist above him. And of course, Andros Townsend, I talked quite a lot in depth about him, what his dad said and things like this. But he was one of the players in the first half, or one of the only players who was causing problems for that Liverpool defence, using his pace, getting past Andy Robertson. Even though in the second half he wasn't as good, he was still one of Palace's best attacking players. And the fact that he hit the crossbar with what proved to be one of Palace's best chances in the game is great. It was great as well. And I have to reiterate how unlucky he was not to score that goal. Lovely dip on that ball from 25 yards out, away from the goalkeeper, going top corner, and it just comes off the crossbar. So if that had gone in, it would have been absolute wonder goal. It's quite unlucky in our respect that obviously it didn't go in, because it could have possibly changed the game. But the fact that Townsend isn't scared to shoot from that distance, and the fact he combined that with an overall good performance, is why he's on this shortlist. Now, for me personally, I think it's quite difficult to pick these players, basically because they've all contributed something different to the game. Because overall, the whole team performance was good, but these players stuck out for me, and it's really difficult to pick one in particular. But I am going to give it to someone who's a bit weird, and I am actually going to give it to Wan-Bissaka. So congratulations, Aaron. I'm going to give it to you this week, and it's not because I think that you were necessarily fantastic in the game. It's purely based on how good you were minus the red card. I could have given it to Hennessy for keeping us in the game. Same could be said for Tompkins for restricting the front three, and I could say the same for Townsend in terms of his attacking contribution. But the main thing that does it for me, and congratulations on winning the man of the match, but the reason I've given it to him is purely based on just how well he was defensively before he got sent off, putting tackles in left, right and centre, as well as that attacking contribution. It's the main reason I've put him forward for the award. But I personally think I could have given any of these players the man of the match award, but personally for me, I do think Aaron Wan-Bissaka out of these players does certainly stand out for me. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wayne Hennessy and Alexander Soroff following the game.
Wayne, here we are again a week later, unfortunately on the end of a 2-0 defeat this time. What did you make of the team's performance?
I actually thought we played very well, but like I said, decision just before half time kind of destroyed us. I haven't seen it again, but a few of the lads are saying that there's not enough contact for him to go down, there's not enough contact for a penalty, so I was saying, very hard done by.
And then Aaron's red card as well. I mean, it's kind of a challenge he had to make. But do you feel like maybe Salah had lost control of the ball before?
Yeah, I actually thought Aaron got a little touch on it, but I haven't seen it again. I want to have a good look at that. Sit down and have a look at it. But like saying, it's disappointing for Aaron. He's been fantastic for us, and he'll be a big miss.
You take a lot of positives from the team from this performance.
Oh, definitely. Like saying, we played really well, and like saying crucial mistakes and stuff that kind of killed us from the referee. But then again, great performance. We had chances, hit the bar. For Andros a shot, fantastic shot, and another day that goes in.
I feel like with the chances created, it was a bit closer than the scoreline suggests.
I
think so, and of course the red card didn't help. But I think we're in the game, we're creating chances. The only thing for us is to put the ball in net.
What did you think of obviously the first goal was a penalty. What did you think of the challenge there?
Couldn't see that well from the sidelines, but I think from what I saw, I think it's marginal. I don't know if he touches him or he falls down. I have to see it again, but from the touchline didn't seem a penalty.
And then the red card as well with Aaron, is it one of those things you just got to take one for the team in that situation?
Yeah, I think he has to. He's Salah is one-on-one against the goalkeeper, and then he has to. And yeah, with 1-0 we could still win the game. If that happens.
Is it always the case when you're throwing everything forward right at the end that you can, especially with this Liverpool side, open yourself up to a counter-attack like that?
Yeah, of course. We try to score on the set piece there, and they have two really fast guys up top, so that happens. But I think we rather, as a team, try to go for the 1-1 and stay back and try not to concede a 2-0. And then I think that's good.
And for you personally, how did you feel you did when you came on?
I felt my touch was all right. Had some good moments. Would of course see that I could score. Hopefully that will happen soon.
Some comfort, some pride in the team's performance, but it's not going to change my disappointment and anger at the way we came at half-time by 1 goal to 0.
Was part of the frustration the fact that the first goal was always going to be so important tonight?
No, the frustration is because I don't think that's a penalty. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I don't think it was a penalty. I don't think it was a free kick on James Milner when we had a counter-attacking chance. I do think it was a penalty in the last minutes when Max Meyer gets wiped out in the penalty area by Van Dijk as he's about to get a touch on the ball. But these things happen. Sometimes refereeing decisions go against you, and as a result, it's disappointing. It's a bit a cause for frustration and anger. But if you ask me about the team's performance, I thought it was very, very good.
Okay. Any other questions?
No point, it's not a penalty. I know, I've been in football a long time. If that's a penalty, then the game has changed beyond all recognition. So what's the point of talking to Mamadou about it? He's trying to defend. There's no way he's looking to foul the player. There's no way he's looking to get a contact on the player at all. And if people can't see that, I'll be the pariah who only sees what he wants to see, and all of you guys out there will see something different, and I'll accept that. But I shall never accept it. I don't want penalties for my team in that way. And if you ask me one day, was it a penalty? Then if I ever say, well, there might have been a slight touch, if I don't say that those situations are not penalties, both for and against, I should be very, very disappointed in myself, and you're quite entitled to take me up on it.
Roy, how do you pick up a young player like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who was very good today, and then obviously gets sent off in those circumstances?
Well, that's one of those things. We were pushing to get an equaliser. I thought we were playing quite well. I thought we were looking reasonably likely to get that equaliser. Certainly we were asking questions of the Liverpool defence, and of course them from a was it a corner kick, wasn't it? I think I can't remember now. Or a ball. It was a ball, I think, lumped forward, wasn't it? And we didn't win the header, and it got quickly towed forward. We were light at the back. He does his level best to try and get back in and stop Salah from going free with the goalkeeper. He definitely touches him, so there's no question of it being a sending off. I don't think he intended to. I don't think he was looking to clip his heels anywhere. I think he was genuinely trying to get a foot on the ball, but he didn't succeed, and as a result he caught the player, and the referee was right to send him off.
And what do you think of Max Meyer in the Premier League debut? It was only brief, I know.
Yeah, too brief to say, but he did get us a penalty situation. He was involved in a penalty situation. I would have given that penalty personally if it had been in training. So I suppose he can be quite happy with that.
Okay. Thank you.
When the disappointment subsides, did you see enough from the team today to think you can meet the targets this season? Is enough there to be positive?
but we haven't really set any great targets. Our target is to continue to try and improve, try and get better, try and make certain that we're not looking over our shoulder all the time from the relegation zone upwards. And I think in the first 2 games, I've got to be more than satisfied with what the team has shown. But of course, it's far too early to say whether that will last through the next 36 games. We'll have to wait and see. But we'll have to pick ourselves up after this disappointment, because it's a very frustrating and bitter defeat when you lose in a way like we lost today, where you will have to forgive me for saying what I feel, and that is that I don't think we gave away a penalty, and I don't think Liverpool deserved to be leading 1-0 at half-time thanks to a penalty.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wayne Hennessy and Alexander Sorloff had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Liverpool. But make sure to come out next week for my post-match review for the game against Watford. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.